There are moments in a woman's life when everything she thought she understood about herself begins to shift. Not because someone changed, not because the world suddenly became clearer, but because she finally realized she'd been living through other people's expectations for far too long. In a culture that tells women to be everything at once, soft but unbreakable, giving but invulnerable, perfect yet endlessly forgiving, clarity becomes an act of rebellion. Many women walk around carrying silent battles inside them: the pressure to be chosen, the fear of being too much, the habit of shrinking so others feel bigger. And yet, there comes a day when something inside refuses to stay quiet. A day when the heart no longer agrees to be negotiated with. A day when a woman stops seeing herself through the lens of who she's been for everyone else, and starts seeing herself as she truly is. This journey is not loud. It's not glamorous. It doesn't look like the highlight reels on social media. Instead, it feels like waking up in a room you've lived in for years and realizing the furniture is all in the wrong place. It's uncomfortable. It's raw. But it is the beginning of a transformation so profound, it changes the very shape of a woman's soul. What follows is the story of that transformation. A psychological, emotional, and spiritual awakening rooted in Jungian depth, modern behavioral insight, and the fierce, unmistakable power of self-recognition. A story that echoes the journey of countless women across America who are learning, finally, to stop chasing validation and start choosing themselves. Let this narrative be a mirror, a guide, and a reminder. Your clarity is your freedom, and your freedom is your rebirth. Has this ever happened to you? A moment when a woman looks into a mirror and realizes she's not truly seeing herself, but rather the collection of expectations, disappointments, and shadows that others have placed upon her. In that suspended instant, she stands between two worlds: the one she thought she belonged to, and the one she is finally daring to question. This is where her story begins, in the quiet, trembling recognition that clarity often arrives disguised as discomfort. She moves through her days carrying invisible histories on her shoulders, unaware that every gesture, every silence, every over-explained apology is the echo of something buried deep inside her unconscious. To the untrained eye, she appears composed, even resilient. But beneath the surface, her inner world shifts like tectonic plates, the old patterns cracking, the suppressed emotions pressing upward, demanding to be known. Jung once wrote that when a woman ignores her shadow, it does not disappear. It simply governs from the dark. And so she has lived, governed by ghosts she never knew she carried. There is a strange beauty in her awakening, though she cannot see it yet. From the outside, one can observe the subtle tremor in her soul, the way she hesitates before accepting praise, how she instinctively flinches when someone offers affection, how she pours out compassion with overflowing hands, but receives so little that her own spirit is left thirsty. She has become a mirror for others, while forgetting she too is allowed to exist. You may know this feeling, that haunting sense that your value depends on the approval of people who never learned how to love themselves, let alone you. But something within her is shifting. A quiet rebellion is forming. She begins to notice how often she compromises to maintain order, how regularly she stays silent to avoid conflict, how she bends herself into shapes that do not align with her truth. It is not weakness, but conditioning, a lifetime spent learning to confuse compliance with connection. Many women carry the same wound, the belief that they must earn affection, justify their presence, prove their worth through sacrifice. Yet psychology teaches that the compulsion to prove anything is always rooted in an early fracture, a place where the inner child learned love was conditional. As she studies her reflection with new eyes, she becomes aware of the archetypes moving within her: the pleaser, the caretaker, the lost maiden, the silent warrior. Each one pulling her in a different direction, each one convinced it alone can protect her. But these internal characters are outdated guardians, formed in moments of vulnerability long ago. They are not her identity, only fragments of her past. Still, you understand how easy it is to mistake these voices for your own, especially when they sound familiar, even comforting in their predictability. There is a tenderness in her struggle, a raw humanity that emerges as she begins to unravel. She senses that the life she has built does not match the truth she feels rising from the depths of her unconscious. But clarity is not gentle. It exposes the illusions she once clung to, the roles she performed, the men she pursued not out of genuine desire, but from a hunger to feel chosen. And when she realizes that craving validation is merely a symptom of forgetting her own power, she is shaken. It is not shame she feels, but recognition, the sharp, luminous kind that cuts through the fog. You, too, might feel that cut. The mind resists self-confrontation because the ego fears collapse, yet the collapse is necessary. Marcus Aurelius wrote that what stands in the way becomes the way, and her obstacles now transform into invitations. Every painful memory becomes a doorway, every heartbreak, a lantern, every disappointment, a teacher. She begins to understand that seeing oneself clearly means surrendering the comforting lies that once kept her safe. She notices small shifts, her posture straightening, not in arrogance, but in ownership. Her voice deepening, not in harshness, but in certainty. She starts questioning the narratives that once shaped her, the belief that she is too much or not enough, or somehow responsible for the emotional chaos of others. Slowly, the fog thins. The woman staring back at her is still forming, but she is real. She is not an echo. She is not a reflection of someone else's desire. She is becoming something more grounded, more sovereign, more whole. And as she draws breath, something ancient in her awakens, the instinct that she was never meant to be molded, only revealed. The days that follow feel different for her, though nothing outwardly dramatic has changed. The transformation happens quietly, in small internal rearrangements that the outer world cannot yet detect. She moves through familiar spaces, but her inner vision has sharpened, and what once felt inevitable now appears negotiable. The patterns she used to obey without question begin to reveal their origins, not in fate nor in personality, but in long-forgotten emotional contracts formed in moments of vulnerability. The unconscious keeps its promises, even when those promises destroy the woman carrying them. She begins to sense how often she lived through borrowed eyes, interpreting herself through the reactions of others. There were times when she shaped her tone so someone wouldn't feel threatened, adjusted her dreams so no one would accuse her of being unrealistic, dimmed her joy to avoid being seen as arrogant. She did not realize that this constant self-editing was a quiet erasure of her own soul. Now, with her sight clearing, she observes herself almost as an archetype, a woman standing at the threshold of her own liberation, but still tangled in the remnants of an old identity. Her unconscious speaks more loudly now. It whispers through discomfort, through a sudden tightening in her chest when she hears a familiar criticism, through a quiet ache when she notices how effortlessly she forgives others, but rarely forgives herself. These signals, once dismissed or overridden, now demand her attention. Jung described this as the psyche's attempt to restore balance, the shadow rising not to punish, but to heal through confrontation. And she feels the truth of it like a pulse beneath her ribs. You may have felt this same tension, the pull between who you were taught to be and the truth that lives beneath the surface. It is not an easy threshold to stand on. To see oneself clearly is to dismantle illusions that once offered comfort. She understands now that her old emotional patterns were not failures, but adaptations, the strategies a young mind created to survive environments that could not meet her needs. These adaptations were brilliant once. But what protects a child often imprisons the woman she becomes. She begins to examine the way she loved, not with blame, but with honesty. Her heart had always been generous, almost excessively so. She gave endlessly, as though her worth were measured in sacrifice. She tolerated dismissiveness, rationalized neglect, accepted half-hearted affection as though it were the best she deserved. The feminine instinct to nurture had been twisted into a compulsion to rescue, heal, or fix those who could not meet her halfway. She carried their chaos like sacred duty, believing that if she just tried harder, loved better, endured longer, she might earn the tenderness she craved. But clarity exposes the truth. Love is not earned. It is exchanged, mutual, reciprocal. And what she called love was often self-abandonment disguised as devotion. As she watches herself from this renewed perspective, something shifts, not in anger, but in understanding. She sees the innocence in her old behaviors, the longing beneath them, the genuine desire to connect. Her heart was not wrong. It was unprotected. She begins to realize that boundaries are not walls, but mirrors, reflecting her worth back to her. When a woman sets a boundary, she is not rejecting others, she is acknowledging herself. This awareness deepens her sense of responsibility for her inner life. She starts listening more closely to the subtle intuitions she once ignored, the whisper that warns her when someone's intentions are misaligned, the quiet nudge that tells her a certain relationship drains her spirit, the internal tightening that signals she is shrinking to make someone else more comfortable. These instincts are not paranoia. They are ancient, feminine forms of wisdom, sharpened across generations of women who survived by listening to what their conscious minds could not yet articulate. Stoic thought begins to resonate within her, the idea that she is responsible only for her actions, not the reactions of others. She cannot control who understands her, who stays, who offers sincerity. She can only control the truth she stands in. This realization is freeing, yet frightening. The old version of her relied on external confirmation. The emerging version seeks internal alignment. You can feel her crossing a psychological threshold. Her silence is no longer submission, it is observation. Her stillness is not fear, it is preparation. She is beginning to unhook her emotional life from the behavior of others, reclaiming her energy from every place she abandoned it. This is the quiet revolution of a woman learning to see clearly. Not loud, not dramatic, but undeniable. She is not rising yet. She is remembering. As the inner rearrangement continues, something profound begins to settle within her. A calm that is not passive, but powerful in its quiet certainty. The world around her feels different now, not because it has changed, but because she is no longer perceiving it through the filters of old wounds. What once felt personal no longer penetrates with the same force. What once felt urgent now appears trivial. Her attention sharpens, and she begins to watch human behavior with new eyes, recognizing patterns not just in herself, but in others. She sees how many people move through life acting out their unconscious stories. A man avoids intimacy because he fears inadequacy. A friend withdraws because vulnerability threatens her fragile ego. A relative criticizes because judgment is easier than self-reflection. She observes it all without absorbing it, realizing that every person carries a private labyrinth of fears, projections, and unmet needs. And for the first time, she understands deeply that their reactions were never a measurement of her worth, only a reflection of their own psychological architecture. This realization softens her. It doesn't make her naive. It makes her discerning. Compassion does not require self-sacrifice. Understanding human nature does not obligate her to tolerate the behaviors that wound her. She begins to practice what Jung called holding the tension of opposites, the ability to see someone's wounds without allowing those wounds to dictate her path. The woman she used to be would have internalized their chaos, trying to rescue whatever was broken. The woman she is becoming recognizes that trying to save others is often a subtle attempt to avoid the emptiness within herself. She faces that emptiness now, not with dread, but with curiosity. The space inside her, once filled with fear, longing, or confusion, becomes fertile ground for clarity. In that quiet space, she notices the voice of her deeper self, the one buried for years under layers of expectation. This voice does not shout, it does not beg, it simply speaks truth. And when she listens, she feels a resonance so deep it vibrates through her bones. Perhaps you have felt this sensation, the sudden understanding that you've been living out an identity constructed by survival rather than authenticity. It is unsettling at first, because truth demands change, and change demands letting go. She begins to let go of what no longer aligns. The relationships built on her silence, the conversations where she shrinks herself, the environments that reward her self-denial. Letting go does not feel like loss. It feels like clearing space for her spirit to breathe. This clearing brings memories to the surface, not to haunt her, but to free her. She remembers moments when she was dismissed, not because she lacked value, but because others lacked vision. She recalls the times she settled, not because she wanted to, but because she feared the loneliness that accompanied self-respect. She sees the version of herself who tolerated inconsistency from others because she was inconsistent in her love for herself. These memories arise not with shame, but with recognition. They are the stepping stones that led her here. Her unconscious begins revealing deeper truths about the masculinity and femininity within her. The feminine within her craves connection, softness, intuition, expression. The masculine craves direction, structure, boundaries, decisiveness. For years, these forces clashed. She over-relied on the feminine when she gave endlessly. She over-relied on the masculine when she shut down to protect herself. Now, she sees that her power comes not from choosing one, but from uniting both. Her inner masculine becomes the guardian of her feminine, not its oppressor. Her feminine becomes the heartbeat of her masculine, not its burden. The balance strengthens her. She notices that she apologizes less, questions herself less, over-explains less. She feels herself returning to an inner center she did not know she possessed. And with every step toward that center, a deeper layer of clarity unfolds. She sees now that many of the people she once chased were not aligned with her spirit. They were aligned with her wounds. They resonated with the version of her that still doubted her worth, the version that feared being alone, the version that mistook emotional intensity for connection. As she heals, these attachments lose their grip. She no longer feels compelled to prove herself, perform worthiness, or seek validation from those who cannot see her. Something within her stands taller now, not out of pride, but out of recognition. She knows she is not the woman she once was, and she is not yet the woman she is becoming. She is in the in-between, the sacred space of transformation, where the old self dissolves and the new self forms with deliberate intention. And in that space, she begins to sense the first true emergence of her inner power, steady, grounded, and quietly unshakable. The shift within her becomes unmistakable, though still invisible to those who only scan the surface of her life. Something foundational is rearranging itself, like a pillar long buried beneath rubble finally being uncovered. She walks through familiar routines with unfamiliar presence, and this presence changes everything. She listens differently. She speaks differently. She even breathes differently, slower, deeper, unhurried, as though her lungs have finally remembered that survival is not the only purpose of breath. What once triggered an immediate emotional reaction now causes her to pause. That pause is not hesitation. It is mastery. She feels the rise of old patterns, the urge to defend, to explain, to soothe someone else's discomfort, and she watches them without obeying. This is the quiet art of emotional detachment, not born of bitterness, but of understanding. She is learning to witness her inner world without becoming consumed by it, just as a seasoned traveler observes shifting landscapes without losing her path. She begins to see that every person she has encountered has been a mirror reflecting some part of her unconscious. The cruel ones revealed the wounds she still carried. The unavailable ones exposed her fear of intimacy. The ones who took too much showed her the places where she did not yet know how to say no. And the rare ones who loved with honesty illuminated the parts of her she forgot to appreciate. Each encounter was an initiation, guiding her into deeper awareness. Jung's words echo through her mind. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. She no longer calls it fate. She calls it instruction. There is something almost sacred in the way she now interprets pain. What once felt like injustice now feels like revelation. Pain becomes a compass, pointing toward unhealed fractures. Instead of numbing or avoiding discomfort, she leans into it gently, asking what it wants her to understand. She discovers that most of her suffering came not from what happened to her, but from the meaning she attached to those experiences. When she shifts the meaning, the suffering dissolves like fog touched by dawn. Perhaps you know this too. The moment when you realize that the version of yourself you defended for years was only a survival strategy. Clever, adaptive, but not truly you. She experiences this revelation again and again, each time peeling away another layer of the identity she once clung to. And beneath each layer lies a deeper truth. That self-worth is not a negotiation. It is a recognition. Her posture changes. She no longer leans toward people, hoping to be chosen. She no longer mirrors their energy, hoping not to be abandoned. She stands in herself, firmly, quietly, unshakably. People sense the change even if they cannot name it. Some are drawn to her with genuine respect. Others become uncomfortable because her newfound clarity exposes their own avoidance. But she does not shrink herself to make anyone more at ease. She no longer abandons herself to protect someone else's illusions. This is not pride, it is alignment. For the first time, she is choosing herself without asking for permission. Her internal world expands, Emotions once tangled in confusion now feel distinct. Anger signaling a crossed boundary, sadness marking an unmet need, fear identifying an old story still replaying in her mind. She responds to each with wisdom rather than panic. Anger becomes assertion, sadness becomes acknowledgement, fear becomes inquiry. This is what it means to evolve, not by becoming invulnerable, but by becoming intimately aware of one's inner landscape. And as she gains this awareness, her unconscious begins revealing long-suppressed desires, not superficial longings, but soul-level callings. She begins to imagine a life carved by intention rather than obligation. The relationships she keeps, the work she pursues, the environments she allows herself to inhabit, all of it begins to shift in accordance with her truth. The woman she once was sought to adapt, the woman she is becoming seeks to align. This alignment creates an energy around her that cannot be mistaken. It is not loud, it is not forceful. It is the energy of someone who has seen herself clearly and refuses to look away. People who once took advantage of her softness no longer find an entry point. Situations that once drained her spirit lose their hold. She is stepping into a level of grounded self-respect that changes the gravitational pull of her entire life. She is no longer waiting for someone to recognize her. She recognizes herself. And with that recognition comes the quiet, unstoppable rise of her inner sovereignty, a power that does not announce itself, but transforms everything it touches. As her transformation nears its quiet crescendo, something profound begins to unfold in the deepest chambers of her psyche. The old version of her, the one built from fear, longing, and self-forgetfulness, has grown thin, almost translucent. It no longer clings to her with the same urgency. It feels like a distant echo, a shadow slipping gently into the past where it belongs. What remains is a woman standing in full awareness, shaped not by circumstance, but by consciousness. She moves now with the unhurried certainty of someone who has walked through fire and learned that flames can illuminate as much as they burn. Her presence carries a depth that others sense before she speaks. It is not intimidating. It is grounding. She no longer seeks to be understood by everyone. She no longer attempts to decode the moods or intentions of those whose inner worlds remain shrouded in their own unhealed chaos. She has stopped carrying emotional burdens that are not hers to hold. A psychological truth settles in her bones. A woman becomes powerful not when she hardens, but when she becomes whole. Hardness is a shield for the wounded. Wholeness is the natural state of the healed. The people around her notice the change. Some are intrigued, some are unsettled. Some feel strangely exposed in her presence, for clarity awakens clarity, and not everyone is ready to be seen. But she does not adjust her light to soothe their discomfort. She honors her path, and in doing so, she silently invites others to rise to their own. Her inner masculine and feminine now move in harmony, no longer rivals but partners. The masculine provides structure, boundaries, discipline, direction. The feminine provides depth, intuition, compassion, authenticity. Together, they create a balanced foundation within her, allowing her to navigate the world with both strength and softness. This balance radiates outward, shaping her choices with exquisite precision. She no longer entertains chaos disguised as passion. She no longer confuses unpredictability with emotional depth. She no longer tolerates relationships that require her to sacrifice her peace in exchange for crumbs of affection. Emotional inconsistency does not attract her anymore. It repels her. She understands now that a stable heart is not boring. It is rare. And perhaps you feel this truth rising within you as well, that self-worth changes what you notice, what you desire, and what you allow. She watches her past self with tenderness, not judgment. That earlier version of her was not weak. She was uninformed. She didn't lack value. She lacked clarity. She did not cling because she was desperate. She clung because she was loyal to her hunger for connection. There is nothing shameful in longing, only in abandoning oneself to fulfill someone else's avoidance. She forgives herself for every moment she settled, every time she silenced her intuition, every time she accepted less than she deserved. Forgiveness becomes the final key that unlocks her inner freedom. She releases the need to rewrite history or correct the past. She knows now that the past was a classroom, and she passed the lesson. With each breath, she detaches from the old narratives that once imprisoned her. The narrative that she needed to be chosen, the narrative that she needed to earn love, the the narrative that her softness was a liability, the narrative that being alone meant being unworthy. All of these dissolve like smoke. What remains is truth, simple, clean, unbreakable. She steps into her life with a new form of sovereignty, not defined by pride, but by presence. Her decisions arise from clarity, not fear. Her boundaries emerge from self-respect, not resentment. Her relationships flow from authenticity, not obligation. She no longer reaches for people who pull away. She no longer apologizes for existing. She no longer attaches her identity to someone else's inability to love her properly. There is no anger in her anymore, no longing for closure, no desire to prove anything. She has outgrown the very spaces where she once felt insufficient. And the moment a woman outgrows what once wounded her, she becomes untouchable. In the stillness of her new awareness, she realizes something profound. She has finally become the woman she needed when she was younger, the one who sees clearly, chooses wisely, and loves deeply without losing herself. This is her rebirth. Not loud, not dramatic, but absolute. A woman who knows her worth does not chase, she chooses. Thank you for joining us on this journey of self-discovery and empowerment. Remember, seeing yourself clearly is a path, not a destination, and every step you take toward your truth brings you closer to the freedom you deserve. If this video resonated with you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel for more content exploring psychology, relationships, and the art of self-empowerment. Your growth is our inspiration, and we can't wait to continue this journey with you.